Alright, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about some really fancy rifle scopes. When I was setting this up, it was nice and overcast, and all of a sudden the sun came out. You know, who could have possibly expected that in Los Angeles? So I apologize about shading differences, but I'm gonna stand in the shade, but I am reasonably confident you're not here to look at me. You're here to look at the rifle scopes and hopefully listen to me. Really hope you're not here to look at me. There's much better use of your time. Anyhow, I'm in a process of doing this lengthy comparison of a bunch of really fancy scopes. These are the first 6 I looked at. I'm done with the optical comparison and the basic feature comparison. I'm gonna do some tracking tests, some other things on some of these. I've got tangent data 5-25 by 56 with a Gen 3 XR reticle. It's about $4,500. I've got a Schmidt PM2 5-25 by 56 with the new grid reticle, the one they call GR squared ID, GR2 ID, whatever. I'll call it the grid reticle. It's really interesting. For me, the reason I took the 525 to review is that they have that reticle only in this scope for now, not in the 3-27 or whatever else. I might look at those later, but I really want to see the reticle. It's an interesting design, so I wanted to look at it. I've got a zero compromise 5-27 by 56 scope. I think this one is some sort of prototype scope. There's something weird happening with magnification markings. Otherwise, in terms of click, feel, and optics, etc., it's just like in their production scopes. So, so from that standpoint, it's a perfectly valid comparison and a nice scope. We'll talk about that. Minix ZP5 5-25 by 56. So these 3 came from manufacturers. The Minix, a friend of mine, Bill, let me use. So it's about to go back to Bill. Leopold Mark V 7-35 by 56, here courtesy of Leopold. Thank you, Leopold. And Carlos K 525 5-25 by 56. That was lent to me by a gentleman, another gentleman from the Heights, so that's about to go back as well. So before I talk about how they compare, note that the prices between them are quite substantially different. 4,500, about 3.5, I think, about 3,800, right around $3,000, 2,400, somewhere there. And Carlos is about 3,200, 3,100, somewhere there. So basically, Tangent is most expensive, then Z-Comp, then Schmidt, then Carlos, then Minix, then Leopold, right? So given the price differences, I don't necessarily fully expect them to be very evenly matched. And the way the optical comparison worked out, I did this during the day and I did this at night. The way of course. Oh no, that was on. Wow. And the way basically these 4, Tangent, Schmidt, Z-Comp, Minix, in terms of optics, belong in the same group. There are differences, but they belong in the same group. And then there is these 2. Leopold is a lot less expensive, so I get why it's not quite as nice optically. It's still very good, all good scopes. Carlos's price-wise should be with these 4. In terms of optical quality, performance-wise, it's really not. At least not with the samples. Like once again, you know, I look at one of each, so there is always sample variation, and I can't account for that, right? I look at one of each. I don't have the bandwidth to look at a lot more. But for example, with Tangents, I've seen a bunch. I know they're consistent. With Schmidts, I've seen a ton of them over the years. Optically, they're quite consistent. Z-Comp's new, so we'll see. I like this one, and I borrowed from a friend The shorter 4 to 20 and optic with both of these are excellent, so hopefully it is an indication that they will be consistent. With Leupold, it's the first high magnification Mark V IC, so we'll see how it goes. With Collis, honestly, I've seen a couple of them already, and I think the optical problems that this scope has, or not so much problems, deficiencies, compared to the field, I think they are I think they're relevant for the whole product line. But anyhow, so moving on, if you don't want to suffer through this whole thing, here's a brief summary in terms of image quality. Tangent for now is still the king of the hill, but not by much. Z-Comp is probably second place, but it's really close between, optically really close between Z-Comp and Minix. Overall, I like the ZCO Z-Comp more than Minix, I think, but optically it's pretty close. And Schmidt is just behind the Z-Comp and Minix, which by itself is pretty freaking remarkable given how long the 5 to 25 Schmidt has been around. I mean, this is not a new design. This was one that started it all. There is a reason why it's sort of the standard by which everybody compares. During the day, Leupold and Collis performed about the same. During the night, Collis was a little bit better than Leupold, but day or night, this scope is not real competitive with these four. It's just that. I say not competitive, not that it doesn't work. You can make good shots and still a good scope, and but the fact that optically the 15-year-old Schmidt is better than Collis, it's mind-boggling to me. I don't know what Collis was thinking. I don't know. Like, Swarovski and Collis are clearly capable of making really nice glass, and this one did not hugely impress me. I also looked at the K3 to 18. I was more forgiving with that one in terms of image quality because the scope is so short, but it has some of the same issues, and I'll talk about that. In a moment. But anyhow, so optics during the day. We looked at this at about 12 power, up close 100 yards, and at 600. And then here I've got a mile or two out, and on a clear day 20 miles. We looked at some resolution charts, but I looked at resolution charts that were 100 yards away. And it's not the same as looking at resolution charts in a collimator, anything like that, because in a collimator the atmospheric effects are minimal, so you don't have to worry about that too much. Once you start looking a little bit further out and there isn't some amount of air between you and a target, the results can vary. When you're looking at black and white resolution charts in the collimator, resolution is king. Once you start looking a little bit further out, how the scope renders color, how it renders contrast, plays a big difference, and that is where tangent still edges ahead. But like I said, the differences are not huge. Once we went further out, 600 yards and beyond, and ramped up the magnification, the tangent edged away a little bit from the competition, right? But Z-Comp was good, Minix was good, Schmidt was good. There's a different feel to some of the nicer scopes, and it comes down to two things. One is the depth of field, how far in front and behind the target you see. All of that helps your brain figure out what it's looking at. And another thing is something we call micro contrast. It's basically how well you see small tonal variations, and that has a direct relevance to how much pop you have in an image. When people talk about image pop, it comes from two things. One is how much contrast it has, just overall contrast, where it makes a significant difference about how primary colors pop. And then there is the micro contrast, and it doesn't give image so much bright pop, but it gives the image texture, right? It's almost palpable texture, and it will mess with your eyes and your brain, because I've had several people say that tangent looks darker to them, but yet you see more. It's not really darker. There's no real light transmission differences. All of these I think are quite good. Maybe I'll measure them, but light transmission by itself has comparatively little to do with how bright or darker the scope looks, right? But anyhow, so all of these are good. In terms of overall optical quality, so Minix has a little bit more contrast than Z-Comp. Z-Comp has a little bit more resolution. I don't know if one edges away from another. If I were forced to pick 1, 2, 3, 4, I would rank them this way. Doing Colors and Mark V. So Colors is a little bit better in low light, but I like overall the view and the stability and distortion control Mark V a little bit better. Like I said, this Colors did not impress me. So we'll see. But like I said, in terms of bang for the buck, well, probably Mark V is the bang for the buck. It's a lot cheaper, but honestly, if you're looking at scopes of this type, it's probably not so much about bang for the buck. You're looking for the best. If you're looking for the best, you're peaking among these, right? During low light testing, these 4 were close. Depth of field of the tangent really helps. It has the greatest depth of field in this group. Closely followed Minix and then Z-Comp and then Schmidt. Schmidt is a slightly flatter image. But one thing you want to keep in mind is that the Schmidt is about 1.5 inches shorter, right? Maintaining depth of field with a shorter scope is harder, right? So that's one of the trade-offs. So Z-Comp is a little bit shorter, still has very good depth of field. Schmidt, Minix and Tangent are about the same length. Tangent is a little bit heavier. These are roughly in the same weight range. And these two are lighter, right around 33 ounces. These are around between 38 and 40, something like that. And low light, all of these control flare well. All of these control unusual light sources. The way I do low light is not just to look at things when it gets dark. I set things up so there are the weird light sources that are somewhere off axis outside the field of view. I'm basically trying to come up with conditions that would cause weird stray light issues, right? And that is really what can potentially differentiate these scopes. Schmidt had just a touch better, Tangent has just a touch better stray light control, but really, you know, all 4 of these were very, very good in low light. Like I said, the only practical difference in terms of optics is that for longer distances, for whatever reason, maybe color rendering, maybe micro contrast, maybe depth of field, the tangent was a little bit better. Now let's talk about features. So reticles, I like the Gen 3 XR. I really like the new Schmidt grid reticle. I'll talk about that more in a separate video. Z-Comp, this one has the MPCT1 reticle, which is not a tree reticle. It's a nice reticle, and the smaller Z-Comp I'm looking at, that has a tree reticle. I like them both, they're nice designs. So the guys behind Z-Comp used to work for Colors, right? And then I don't know if they left or got fired and started their own thing. So the Colors has the skimmer reticle SKMR3. To me, the reticles in the Z-Comp kind of look like the next generation evolution of the same basic idea as a skimmer, but instead of solid lines, I've got dots, which I prefer. It obscures less. But the skimmer reticle here is perfectly viable. The only thing I kind of don't like about it too much is that with the skimmer reticle, when you are looking at a tree, you've got half milliradian subtensions, while all the rest of this give you, and there's MR4 reticle here, another tree reticle, all the rest of these are built around 0.2 milliradian subtensor, which is kind of the standard right now. And the Colors has 0.2 on the main axis, on the main horizontal, but in the vertical and in the tree, it's 0.5. And to me, it's a little bit dyslexic, right? And that's my basic problem with a few reticles out there. I kind of like this consistency of subtension, but clearly works. People clearly use it. Clearly works nicely. Reticles are really an eye of the beholder. The Leupold I have is a standard TMR reticle, which is, it's old, but it works. People win competitions with this thing. It doesn't obscure anything. It's kind of nice to use. In terms of controls, if you look at the eyepieces and all that, tangent, Z-comp, Minix, and Collis have the larger eyepieces. Larger eyepiece usually means a wider field of view, which is correct for all of them except for the Collis. So Collis is doing this weird ass thing where the eyepiece is capable of wide field of view, and then they are intentionally constricting it. And I'll be damned if I fully understand why, but when you look at this, not only is the field of view comparatively narrow, but it also looks narrow because you see the field stop, right? So there's a massive black ring around the image, and I don't fully understand why they do it. In terms of the actual field of view, interestingly, some of the specs I found online for Collis are just wrong. Don't match the scope. Collis and Mark V have the same field of view, the same magnification, best I can tell. Schmidt is an older design, so the field of view is wide, but there is tunneling. So Schmidt is really a 7 to 25 scope. It's been discussed ad nauseum, so I'm not going to extrapolate on that too much. So all of these, other than the Mark V, has well-designed reticle illumination. So I'm not going to talk about it too much. Schmidt doing something interesting. That's a separate video. The TMR I got does not have reticle illumination, but Leopold on all the recent scopes does illumination well, so I'm comfortable with that. Some of these have locking eyepiece focus, but all of them have fairly fast, easy to adjust eyepiece focus. Some people really like the locking eyepiece focus. I'm somewhat ambivalent because once I put all the caps on and everything, it's not moving anywhere anyway. Turret feel. So tangent's still the king, I think. Although the guys at Z-comp disagree. Well, it's their scope, they should disagree. Z-comp is probably the best of the locking turrets, right? It has a really nice feel. Subjectively, to me, Tangent is better. Of the locking turrets, Z-comp is probably the best I've seen yet. The Schmidt I have here also has a locking turret. I've seen these turrets a ton. This is a double turn turret that locks. There's a collar, it goes up and down. That gives you a nice indication that it's locked. It's easy to unlock. So with the more common locking turrets like the Schmidt or a few others, the whole turret comes up. So to unlock it, you have to kind of pull up on this. With the Schmidt, if I want to unlock it without moving anything, so now it's locked, I can reference off the top and pull it up. So with the Schmidt, it's easier for me to unlock the turret without disturbing my shooting position, right? The clicks on the Schmidt are closer together than on Z-comp or Tangent. The feel is not quite as good, but it's, you know, a ton of you have Schmidts, I'm sure you've seen them. It's perfectly viable. My basic litmus test is, can I make 1 click or 10 click adjustment without losing, while looking at the scope, without looking at the turret, and without losing my point of aim. And I can do it with the Schmidt, I can do it with the Z-comp. With the Z-comp, I just need to experiment with it a little bit more. You can kind of push off of the scope and go like this. I need to make sure I can unlock the turret if I'm so inclined without losing my point of aim. I can definitely do it with the Schmidt. The Minix has a comparatively more conventional turret, pretty decent feel. They've had a little bit of a spotty history with the turret. It seems to be stabilizing. The feel is not as good as the Z-comp, not as good as the Schmidt. Collis has a nice turret, right? So it's a 60 mm turret, clicks a little closer together, but they are not any closer than the Schmidt. Schmidt turret, older design, right? So it's a larger diameter turret. Smaller diameter turret, so the clicks feel like they're closer together, but they work nicely. Leopold has the smallest number of clicks per turn, so I've got 14, what's it, I think, on this sucker, it's what? It's, used to remember all this stuff, 15, the Minix I think is 15, right? The Minix is 15, 10 and a half, so that you can stagger the numbers. And I think 16. Is it 16? Yeah. So honestly, 12 would have been 5 for me. But yeah, they all work. I can't really complain. I am trying to decide what I like more. So Leupold has this thing where the turret locks at 0. You need to press a button to unlock it, and then it doesn't lock and locks at 0, versus a more traditional locking turret like Schmidt and Z-Comp have. Can't quite figure out which approach I like more. They all work. So I don't know. I'm going to try to get my lapel mic close to a turret. So this is, see if you can hear the clicks. This is tangent. Okay. Schmidt, a lot more subdued, but still nicely distinct. Z-Comp, very different sound. I know how they do the turret inside. It's kind of different. Minix, so less tactile, but good sound. Leupold, in terms of sound and feel, Leupold and Minix turrets are not too far off from each other. And here's the colors. So good tactile feel, but in terms of sound, Collis is probably the quietest. Yeah, so that's it. In terms of the other controls, so the side focus and all of this is done pretty nicely. The only real complaint I have with the tangent is that the magnification ring is kind of stiff, right? So I'm going to need to get a cattail of some sort for this. For the Schmidt, it's perfectly weighted. The best control feel from the standpoint of the weight of the magnification ring and all that, it's probably Z-Comp. I think it's excellent in that regard, just a nice, well-rounded scope. Minix is also a little bit stiff. Leupold is easy to use, and it comes with this cattail already. And Collis has a very nicely weighted magnification ring and nicely weighted illumination. The standout feature for the Collis, and what makes it still kind of viable, is that the parallax is integrated under the elevation turret. So for left-handed shooters, I think it makes a big difference. Whether it's enough to overcome some of the things I don't like about the scope is anybody's guess, but it's not a bad scope. So just don't misunderstand me. It's just not as good as the best. And what I've got here, I think, here, what I've got on this side is, I think, is the best, right? What else can I tell you offhand? That's effectively it for now. I'll do a few more videos here and there, and I'll do through the scope videos with the reticles. Oh, one other thing to comment. So Leupold is a 35mm tube, so it's a little bit different. Z-Comp is 36. The rest of them is 34. I know a lot has been made out of it. I really don't care. It's all the same to me. If the rings exist, you can buy them. If you are buying a $3,500–4,000 scope, you should be capable of spending $200 for whatever rings you need to buy for these. And I think that's basically it. If there is something I forgot to cover, if you have any questions, please ask in the video comments or through my website or through one of the forums that I frequent. And thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time. I'll be doing more videos on these scopes. I'll do so the Minix and the Collis, since I borrowed them for private people. I'm about to go back to their owners. I'm not going to do tracking tests on them. These people shoot with them, and they know if they track or not. The rest of these I already started doing some, and I'm going to continue doing tracking tests and make sure that everything works as it should. And once again, thank you for watching, and stay tuned.